Please take a second to subscribe, then like and share afterwards. We can really use your support. Thank you. Genesis 6:14. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark, and cover it inside and outside with pitch. In the previous 2 episodes, we covered the amazing evidence for the global flood with the accounts from every corner of the globe and every major civilization known through history, as well as the plethora of geologic evidence of a cataclysmic global flood. But now, it is time to address the elephant in the room. When it comes to the science, most researchers don't want to go tackle the subject of an ark that could have possibly been built by apparently uneducated, unskilled ancient people. Could it house and feed 2 of every animal living for an entire year? Could it even float? How could some of these animals be redistributed to far-flung islands like Australia or the South Pacific? Well, after a great deal of research, we may have discovered the answers to these questions. Not only have we discovered that every element of the story is actually feasible, we have the archaeological evidence to present to you that the ark is precisely what the scriptures tell us that it was made. For years, I was skeptical about the supposed discoveries as first documented in the 1950s, but as I continued my analysis of the investigations and the data that was drawn, I knew it was time to make it a part of the series. In October 1959, a Turkish Air Force mapping mission for NATO snapped this black and white photograph directly above the site called Durupınar in eastern Turkey near the Iranian border. Limited study was conducted but largely ignored for years. In 1985, Ron Wyatt and a team of geologic experts scanned the entire ship anomaly with a molecular frequency generator, a device used by surgeons to pinpoint cancer tumors and also used to scan shipwrecks. On this site, the scans begin to discover a unique pattern of lines of iron beneath the surface. By following these lines, they placed ribbons along these lines, and once the scans were complete, it formed a grid. Samples of the iron was tested and was revealed it was indeed iron. When measuring the proportions of the grid, the measurements matched precisely that of the construction requirements provided to Noah in Genesis 6. Later, geologists brought in heavy-duty subsurface radar equipment. Reflections from the scans revealed that there were beams of what appeared to be timber cross-sections and other structural elements. Geologic survey systems concluded this was certainly a man-made structure that appears to be a large ship. They point out that the ridge timber rib pattern can still be seen on the side of the apparent structure. It was built much like the way ships are made today. In some areas, one can still see the vertical fissures between the ribs, where centuries of mudflow has taken over much of the structure. On the starboard side, you can still see 4 protruding deck support beams that has survived. When looking along the entire center of the ship, you can still see a mound running along the entire length. This is what remains from the collapse of the decks of the ship. Experts conclude that the ship was much higher on this mountain in ancient times and slowly slid down by a mudflow until it reached a rocky outcrop where it got impaled. You can see where it protrudes near the center of the ship today. The Wyatt team has found a number of interesting artifacts within the site. One is a piece of petrified deck timber. After cutting through a portion of it, testing revealed a high level of organic carbon that is consistent with wood. There appears to be 3 layers to this timber, like what we see with plywood today, with a glue-like substance that appears to ooze out from the ends. What's interesting is the outer layer is covered in some type of darkened pitch. This is consistent again with Genesis 6:14, and cover it inside and outside with pitch. After drilling into the side of the ship, the team extracted petrified animal dung. Cat hair was also found, along with petrified remains of an antler. Despite the arguments of skeptics, antediluvian cultures were actually experts at metalworking. Genesis 4:22 states that Tubal-Cain was an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and iron. This explains a large 4-inch metal rivet that was also found at the site. The center rod would have been struck while still hot, causing the head to flare out, as you can clearly see here. This technique would have locked the washer in place. Test results conclude it consists of 8% iron and 8% aluminum metal, a man-made alloy. It also comprised of nearly 2% titanium. This never appears in metallic form in nature, proving it to be a man-made structure. What's striking is that aluminum metal wasn't made in modern history until around the year 1900. This proves that this wasn't planted here in more recent times. Metal fittings were found all across this site in various areas, right where they would expect to be along cross-beam connections. In 2014, a geophysicist from New Zealand, John Larson, received a permit to conduct a modern scan of the ship using resistivity readings. The results from his work is incredible. First, we see empty space under the surface of the bow. Then we see a 3D rendering of the scans that penetrate deep underground. It is clear that the body of this ship is seen deep below the surface. We can see this ship suffered a great deal of damage as it was impaled into this present position it's in now. As the scans are viewed, each color we see here indicates different electrical resistances of material beneath the ground. The software utilized here allowed Larson to filter out certain resistances in order to focus on similar substances, such as eliminating the mud and dirt buildup versus actual structure they're looking for. The portion we see at the surface is only the tip of the iceberg. This scan shows the complete length of the ship is the current grade of the mountain, and this reveals that the outcrop at center not only impaled the ship, but it nearly tore it in two. This black line reveals the current surface of the ground compared to what is seen below. Scans shown that within the hull can be found 3 distinct surfaces found inside the ship that extends across its entire width. There appears to be 3 decks. Genesis 6:16 confirms that God instructed Noah, "You shall make it with a lower, second, and third decks." This area with high resistivity reveals a 35% grade that may be a central stairway linking all 3 decks for accessibility. At the middle deck level, it flattens out to 0 degrees that suggests a landing. Next to this landing, another scan reveals a 4-meter high by 5-meter wide square opening, and it is the only area that can be seen to penetrate the side of the hull. This anomaly is suggested by scan experts to be the very entrance doorway into the ship, which leads directly to the middle landing where animals would have been led up the ramp to the upper deck, down to the lower deck, and left or right into the middle deck. It is a logical design and consistent with Genesis. Then, in 2019, another expedition to the site brought about the results of further scanning. This time, inner walls were shown to be present within the structure. There appears to be squared rooms with 90-degree corners, making visible numerous partitions for separate rooms or cages. As the Wyatt Foundation collected all of this data from the 1985-87 expedition, the 2014, and the 2019 scanning, they had a model of the ship made based on all this collected data. Now here is a discovery that many were not expecting to find. Near the city of Sagliksuyu, only several miles from the site, was found a number of anchor stones, which would have been part of the ship's stabilization system. It would have been one of many that was designed to stabilize the ship in volatile waters. These were not mentioned in the biblical account, but they are mentioned in the flood account in the Epic of Gilgamesh. These would have been cut away soon before the ship was grounded on the mountain, which explains its near proximity to the ship. Sagliksuyu has always been known through ancient times, according to locals, as the Place of the Eight, alluding to the number of survivors of the flood. It's the place said where they first settled. This anchor stone measures 11 feet in height and with a tapered hole drilled at the top, 5 inches on one end and 7 on the other. This allows a rope to be tied to it underwater. The crosses carved on the faces of each of these stones were done by early Christians by the looks of their design. Some are carved in the Crusader-style period. This rendering makes it clear that each cross signifies each survivor, highlighting Noah as the dominant figure. Here's a look at the other stones found in the area. This one was partially buried. This one has a carving of what appears to be a tower, like those depicting the Tower of Babel. Here you see yet another that has been broken, but the borehole can still be seen at the top. The leading authority on anchor stones in the world is Honor Frost, who in 1973 published Angkor, the potsherd of marine archaeology. Based on her research, a 700 kilogram or 1,500 pound stone is the heaviest ever found by that time. This is until these stones in eastern Turkey. The 11-foot stone found near Sagliksuyu in 1977 weighs 8,700 pounds, about 4.5 times larger than the previous record found by Frost. Then again, Noah's Ark was roughly 6 times larger than any ancient ship. As the Ark would have neared the time of grounding, the stones would have needed to be cut loose to avoid premature damage to the bottom of the ship or cause it to tear apart. Therefore, God would have instructed Noah to begin cutting these stones loose at a safe time prior to that happening. The location of each of these stones were found to have been properly mapped in relation to the mountain above the Ark's resting place. Here we see where the stones landed as it creates a line leading into the east-southeast direction. Then 2 others about 30 kilometers in the same direction, and only yards from here we find the Ark, all consistent with what we'd expect in the account. One interesting hypothesis is that today's capital city of Ankara, 950 kilometers west of here, may have originally been the site where one of the stones had been dropped prematurely, either by accident or intentional. Ankara was known in classical antiquity as Ankyra, in ancient Greek meaning anchor, a name taken by its same meaning going back much earlier. Ankara is situated in line with the stones in Sagliksuyu and the Ark. Experts hired by a National Geographic team in 2009 was set to the task to see how a model of the Ark would fare in hostile waters. First, without any stabilizers. Results were shown that the Ark did not fare well, as it was overturned on each test. However, by tying stones under the ship, the tests came out extremely positive, as it was not able to overturn despite imposing even stronger waves than the first test. This proves that a number of drogue stones were necessary to stabilize the ship. Another area outside the town of Kazan was found a very large object that appears to be petrified tree bark with unusual characteristics. It also has connections to the ark because of the faint carvings of the crosses like those found on the drogue stones. Listen as this gentleman knocks this object. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. Now it is time to address the pressing question. Could this ship have the capacity for the number of animals needed to save the diversity of living land animals we see today? They found that the given dimensions of the ship, accounting for a 15% reduction in volume due to the curvature of the hull and bow, an ark this size could contain the equivalent of 450 semi-trailers of cargo. According to estimates in 2014, there are fewer than 1.8 million documented species of organisms in the world. Considering that over 98% of these are ocean dwellers, invertebrates, and plants and bacteria, this means that there are fewer than 34,000 species of known land-dependent vertebrates today, which is all we need to take care of inside an ark. As Genesis uses the term kinds, a source of contention among skeptics, few realize that the kinds are referred to as baramins, which is the Hebrew words for created and kind. This study today is called baraminology. Researchers then applied the criteria for baramin, including the hybrid data that allow closely related animals that can successfully produce offspring. The depth of this subject is far beyond the scope of this episode. However, we can summarize that if only young, vibrant pairs of animals that had not reached full growth would save incredible space regarding the larger breeds. They are easy to manage, they eat less, and are far more resilient to the incessant rocking and swaying. According to studies by Ark Encounter based in Kentucky, the teams estimate there were fewer than 7,000 animals aboard the Ark, although further study on hybrid data could even bring that down. That number is broken down by both living groups and extinct groups in the categories of amphibians, reptiles, non-mammal synaptids, mammals, and birds. Conclusively, there would have easily been enough capacity on this Ark. As these animals were redistributed to the various corners of the world, further variations within the kinds would have bred. We see this with dogs today. Genetic recombination would have produced variations over a short period of time as they adapted to the various climates and conditions they were migrated to. And as we touched upon in the previous episode, the Earth's continents were not yet fully breaking apart until soon afterwards, meaning there were land bridges available for crossing. Join me next time, where we move forward in the Old Testament to the events of the Table of Nations and the events leading to the Tower of Babel, here on Evidence Uncovered.